Double game week 24, FPL transfer plans, 4 free transfers, 0.8 in the bank, and loads of different routes I could take. Let's take a look at some of my early thinking going into the first double game week of the season. Right then, so a quick summary first off of how game week 23 has gone. I used 1 free transfer to bring in Cody Gakpo for Nico Jackson. Obviously, Jackson did get a return against City, but only the assist, whereas Cody Gakpo went and got himself 3 attacking returns. Very, very helpful, and I'm really glad I brought him in a week in advance of the double game week. Took a little bit of a risk on minutes, and obviously he got taken off early, but I'm very happy to own him going into double game week 24, and it does complete that Liverpool triple up of Trent, Salah, and Cody Gakpo. So that does simplify my transfer plans a bit going into the double game week, but there's still plenty of other routes I want to take. 4 free transfers to do it with, and it looks like a really healthy green arrow going into game week 24. 85 points, I'm all out, although we've still got matches to play. I'm pretty confident it will be a green arrow of some description. We're halfway through the Villa-West Ham match at time of recording. We've got Man United and Fulham to play later on, but none of the players are that highly owned that it's going to turn my green arrow into a red one. 85 points all out. It's a decent week no matter what happens, but as it stands, a really, really positive one. So there's 4 free transfers, 0.8 in the bank, and plenty of different routes I could take going into the double game week. Of course, at the moment, I've got no Everton, but there's also a couple of other teams that I want to target going into the double game week. As always, do let me know in the comments below how you got on in game week 23 as well. Right then, so let's have a look at some of my transfer plans going into the double game week. Like I mentioned, I've already got triple Liverpool, so actually that kind of simplifies the process on where I want to be prioritising my transfers. And it also means that I do have other options outside of double game week players because I've got 4 free transfers, a little bit of money, and let's be honest, I don't really want to triple up on Everton. As good as they've been recently, it might be overexposing myself to a team that isn't a top half team and they're not going to consistently grind out wins every single week. So I'm happy enough going with 1 or 2 Everton, but to max out and go for 3 probably isn't on my agenda this week. In terms of the first position I'd be looking at, clearly, in goal, David Raya hasn't really been good value for money. Generally speaking, 1 clean sheet in the last 4 isn't good enough. Although what I would say is, of course, getting that clean sheet against Wolves did give me some pause for thought, because after Man City, it's not a bad run of fixtures at all. They've got Leicester, West Ham, Forest, and Man United. In a bank of 4, that's really not that bad, and especially if they get knocked out of the Carabao Cup, they might not even blank in game week 29 either. Of course, at time of recording, they're 2-0 down after the first leg against Newcastle, so they are maybe odds on to get knocked out of the Carabao Cup and therefore would play in game week 29. So David Raya and Gabriel, to a lesser extent, might not be must-sells, but I think because the alternative for Everton is as strong as it is, and cheaper, for me, I think it's worth bringing in Jordan Pickford. Now, again, it's not a perfect transfer, but it does save me a little bit of money to help me manoeuvre elsewhere. And the fixture run coming up isn't bad for Everton either. They've also been improved under David Moyes. Leicester at home as part of the double game week 2 is a good opportunity for a clean sheet. And as I've been saying for a little while, I'm not expecting a clean sheet against Liverpool. That would be crazy to expect that, but you could still expect maybe a couple of save points, and who knows? He might pull something out the bag in what is, of course, a huge game for Everton. The final Merseyside derby at Goodison Park. They will be up for it. And David Moyes, obviously, with his history at the club, is going to really drill the players and amp them up for that game. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. In terms of recently, of course, they've been in pretty good nick. They beat Spurs and now they've beaten Brighton, so that's 2 on the bounce. And the defensive data across the season isn't that bad. 1.32 XGC per 90. It's really not too bad. It's upper of average. And the fixture run after or outside of the Liverpool game, Palace, Man United, Brentford, Wolves, West Ham, they won't blank in game week 29, that's guaranteed, barring some sort of act of God, of course. But generally speaking, it's a pretty decent run, and Everton have been tight enough that I'd back the goalkeeper for a couple of clean sheets in that run and also some save points. Of course, Jordan Pickford himself is the second highest scoring keeper too, so he's been very decent this season. So I think for me, that is transfer number one kind of locked in. Of course, I can't go for Alisson. I still think he's a good pick, but the reason I went for Cody Gakpo, one, was because of the upside, but also two, I don't have a goalkeeper to come in for Alisson in game week 29 if they blank that game week, and I don't really want to be moving Valdemarson out. Of course, he's not a playing keeper, so I do want a keeper that I can rely on to definitely start for me in game week 29 if I wasn't going to use the free hit that week, which is, of course, still an option. But Pickford, with that double, 2 home games, one of them should be a pretty reasonable chance of a clean sheet, save points in the other. I think it's a pretty sensible transfer ahead of David Raya at home to Man City. After that, we can look at the defence. Now, I don't think there's any major moves that need making this week, but there is one low-hanging fruit that does make a lot of sense, and that would be to look at Mykolenko. Now, obviously, other Everton defenders are available, but Mykolenko at his price point, for me anyway, makes the most sense, and I think you'll see a lot of people talking about him. His attacking upside over the season hasn't really been that great, but they are playing with higher wing backs than they did under Dyche, and Mykolenko will get opportunities at different moments during the season to go forwards. Again, I wouldn't expect miracles. He's not going to turn into a Daniel Munoz or anything like that. He won't get that kind of data, but it's good enough, or we expect it to be good enough, for 4.4 million to be decent value for money. Now, of course, I'm not going to run over the fixtures again, but if I wanted to double up on the Everton defence, my plan probably would be to start Pickford every week, but Mykolenko could come in and out of my side when they've got good game weeks. So, of course, I start him in the double game week with Leicester-Liverpool. After that, Crystal Palace away might not be a bad week to start him in, but I don't think it's a must. And then you're probably looking at Wolves and West Ham as the other 2 fixtures in this run, where you're confident enough in starting him. And of course, he's picked up clean sheets at random moments during the season. He's not been a bad asset either. And at 4.4 million, I don't really think you can go wrong. It's more for me whether or not it makes sense in my side. And looking across the board, of course, Gabriel, if I'm selling Raya, I don't really want to get rid of Gabriel. I want at least some Arsenal coverage in defence with that fixture run coming. But after that, Trent, of course, with the double game week and good data, all of that, he's obviously going nowhere. So it leaves one of Greaves, Robinson or Hall to be getting rid of. Now, in all honesty, I don't massively want to get rid of Lewis Hall, who has been fantastic recently. Now, the problem is, of course, the clean sheets have dried up a little bit, but the winning run, or mostly outside of the Bournemouth game, the winning run has been immense for Newcastle. And of course, the attacking data is not half bad either at 0.18 XGI per 90. So I don't massively want to be getting rid of him. It's not a great run of fixtures, but 2 of the next 4, I think he's definitely playable in Fulham and Nottingham Forest. And after that, all the way through to probably game week 34, it's another good run for Newcastle. So I'm not going to get rid of Lewis Hall. Robinson, maybe you could look at getting rid of. Man United is obviously game week 23, hasn't been played yet at time of recording. But then it goes into Newcastle, Forest, Crystal Palace, Wolves, Brighton. Again, it's not a run that I'm massively scared of owning him for. And his ownership is pretty high. The attacking data is good. And he is massively overperforming it as well. 9 assists so far is the highest of any defender. So again, another player that I would be taking a massive gamble if I was to sell him. That leaves Greaves. So if I was to get rid of Greaves and bring in Mykolenko, because of the money I've saved on Raya down to Pickford, I could do that with just 2 free transfers, still have 0.8 in the bank to make other manoeuvres as well, which will be important in a moment's time. And it gives me double Everton defence and 5 double game weekers overall. Now, you might be saying that's a little bit too much exposure for the Everton defence, but like I said, because I've got 5 strong defenders now, or playing defenders at least, Mykolenko could sit on my bench most game weeks and just come in for the odd 1 or 2. And as I mentioned, the other players, Alexander-Arnold's going to start every week for me, Gabriel probably similar, and then Robinson and Hall can come in and out as and when they've got good fixtures too. So I'm happy enough having a strong 5 there, and Mykolenko could sit pretty comfortably in my defensive line alongside the rest of them. So moving into my forward areas, that being the midfield and up front, there are another couple of transfers that I'd be eyeing up. Now, of course, I don't massively want to be going for other Everton attackers. We've got Dwight McNeil, who's still out. DCL, Calvert-Lewin, has also looked like he's pulled up with a hamstring injury and probably won't be available. Ndai is probably the only one left, and even him, I'm not sure that he's a massively tempting option. Now, we do know that if he's fit, and by the way, he came off early against Brighton, so it's one to monitor, but if he's fit, without DCL in the side, he would be on penalties. So that is slightly tempting, but as I mentioned, if I bring him in, and it would be for João Pedro, by the way, if I brought him in, how many of these game weeks am I honestly going to be starting him? Probably not that many, but it's still going to be an 8th attacker that I'm not comfortable bringing in after the double game week really at all. And I think personally there are other strikers that I'd prefer to be bringing in ahead of João Pedro rather than Ndai. And although he scored 2 in the last 2 and he is on penalties with DCL out, the attacking data is still pretty shocking. 0.21 XGI per 90. It's not a player that's filling me with massive confidence, and he is being taken off early under David Moyes as well so far. Now, of course, one of them could be an injury. That is, of course, one to make sure you keep your ear to the ground on him. And if you are looking at bringing him in, don't do so unless you hear he is definitely fit. But again, the fixtures don't look good enough for me to be bringing in a striker with that kind of underlying data personally. Now, there is upside there. He has got a double game week, and I wouldn't put anyone off of going for him. But there are other players that I think I'd prioritise over Everton attackers going into game week 24 and could last me all the way up to when I wildcard as well, with much better data and much better fixtures as well. So if I move past Everton, who I think outside of the defensive assets, Pickford and Mykolenko, I'm pretty happy with. I don't think I need to go all three. After that, the next team that I'd want to be looking at is Brentford. Now, Brentford have been phenomenal this season, especially on the underlying attacking data, and are now hitting a period where their fixtures turn really, really positive again. All the way through to game week 29, it starts off with Spurs at home, which on paper isn't green, but it is a great fixture. Let's be honest, Spurs have not been good at the back recently. They've got a lot of defensive issues, and Brentford at home have been absolutely phenomenal. They've scored in almost all of their games this season at home. And Mbeumo and Wissa both have great underlying attacking data, will be probably playing in a front two with a 3-5-2 formation against Spurs. And then the fixtures after that, West Ham, Leicester, Everton, Aston Villa, Bournemouth. Bournemouth will be tricky. They've been phenomenal themselves recently, and I'll come on to them in a minute. But Brentford strikers or attackers generally look like fantastic purchases going into game week 24, even without the double game week. And that would lead me to my main decision now. So if I'm bringing in both Mykolenko and Pickford, which is definitely on the cards, at the very least Pickford will be coming in, I then need to make a decision on if I want to bring in Brentford attackers this game week, and if so, which one and who for. So to start off with, I think the most tempting one for me personally is Yoane Wissa for João Pedro. Now, the reason I'm so tempted by that is because Wissa's data is so far beyond that of João Pedro's, and João Pedro himself has been very disappointing for me recently. So it's sorting out an issue and bringing in a player with great underlying data, good minutes as well, and good fixtures to come. So although it's quite tight on the budget if I were to make all three of these moves, it's one that I'm really tempted to move early on. I have the exact money, as you can see. If I went early on this, I'd be really happy with my squad going into game week 24, but then also coming out of it as well. Having a front three of Isak, Gakpo and Wissa sounds a lot better to me than having João Pedro in there at the moment. Although he doesn't have bad fixtures and Southampton on the horizon as well, so it might not be a must sell, but it's a stronger sell in my mind anyway than getting rid of the alternative, which would be to keep João Pedro and then also get rid of Anthony Gordon, who has been very impressive recently. But if I was to go to Bryan Mbeumo this game week, it would have to be for Gordon. There's no way I'm getting rid of Salah, no way I'm getting rid of Palmer at home to West Ham, and I can't afford to do so for Semenyo, who again, very happy to keep, and Amad Diallo as well wouldn't get me the money for it. So getting rid of Gordon for Mbeumo is something I've got the money for. I can't do Wissa in for Pedro as well. I'd be 0.1 short, but I could go there. The problem there for me is I'm getting rid of a player I'm already pretty happy with. And okay, on paper, the fixtures don't look that great for the next 4, but I back him to do well in the next 2 at the very least. And even if I didn't want to hold on to him long term, I could always make the move across to Mbeumo in a week or two's time when they do actually have worse fixtures than Fulham at home. So I don't think it's a must-sell this week for Gordon, although he's probably not a mainstay in my side for too much longer, especially once we get more information on whether or not they've made it to the final of the Carabao Cup. If they do so, they'll miss out in game week 29 at home to Palace and get a double game week later on in the season. So if that's the case, then the next 5 look like Fulham, Man City, Nottingham Forest, Liverpool, West Ham, blank, then Brentford. So unless you're maybe free hitting in game week 29, he's probably an easier player to sell under those circumstances. For the time being, though, I don't think he's as much of an easy sell as João Pedro is. And so I'd probably prefer to prioritise that transfer ahead of the Gordon to Mbeumo one. So I'm just going to remove Bryan Mbeumo for the time being, keep Anthony Gordon in there right now, and with 0.8 in the bank, if I wasn't going to move for either Wissa or Mbeumo, the other team that are definitely putting their hands up right now is Bournemouth. Now, I'm lucky, I've already got Semenyo. He's been frustrating, but I finally started him against Nottingham Forest this week and got a return. The next load of fixtures for them, all the way through, arguably all the way through to the end of the season now, look absolutely phenomenal. Liverpool at home is the hardest of the bunch in game week 24. Once that's out of the way, it's just a sea of fantastic fixtures. And given the form they've been in recently, 9 goals in their last 2 against Newcastle and then against Nottingham Forest, who have both been very good defences, is one Bournemouth attacker going to be enough? I think probably yes, but you could easily double up, and Kluivert is now the 4th top scoring midfielder in the entire game. He's gotten more than 1 attacking return for the 2nd game week in a row now. He's got, 6 in the last 2 and 7 in the last 3. He's been very hot and cold, and he has exploded at certain moments. But he has gotten much better minutes with all of the injuries that Bournemouth have had recently. So I wouldn't complain about anyone wanting to bring him in, even ahead of Liverpool at home if you really wanted to. More likely, though, ahead of game week 25 against Southampton. He's a player that I'm jealous of, a little bit less so because I've got Semenyo, and I think it's a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If you've got a Bournemouth attacker, you probably stick with them, either with Altara, Semenyo, or Kluivert. All of them look really good at the moment, and I'm happy enough owning Semenyo. He's got good underlying attacking data and really good on the expected minutes. Kluivert is a great buy. I think I might very slightly lean towards buying him over Semenyo now if I had the information and I hadn't got either of them just yet. But given I've already got Semenyo, I'm happy enough not to waste another transfer on that. And for the time being, especially because it's Liverpool first up, I'm not willing to make a move for another Bournemouth attacker this game week in particular. Although, if they impress yet again against Liverpool, they could be an option to go really aggressive on going into game week 25 against Southampton. You could look at Kluivert and Semenyo or Altara as a double up, maybe getting rid of Ahmad in my particular situation. Or I could look at another defender and maybe go for a Kirkez in for someone like a Robinson, or Mykolenko if I do go there for 1 game week only. Either way, I think Bournemouth can maybe wait 1 week, but I wouldn't complain about anyone bringing them in a week early and capitalising on the fantastic form that they're in right now. As it stands, I've got the exact money to make the triple swap of Pickford, Mykolenko and Wissa in, if I make the moves on screen now, just to illustrate. I can make all of those 3 moves for the exact money in the bank. No hit required. Obviously, I've got 4 free transfers. Getting rid of Raya, Greaves, who's obviously just on my bench. That's not going to have any impact on me whatsoever. And a faltering João Pedro as well. Now, I really like that as a triple swap, but I'm very tight on the money. I don't usually like making early moves, and I'm kind of just hoping that these guys don't rise in price anytime soon, and I can maybe make this decision towards the end of the week rather than having to do it early on. However, if I do get warning that one of these players is about to go up in price and I have enough conviction before I get more information, it might be a triple swap worth doing early in the game week if I do believe the upside is there. And my instinct right now is that I think it probably is. If I was to maybe go a little bit more cautious, the one player that I might not dive headfirst into right now would probably be Mykolenko, and I could just maybe remove that transfer from my thinking for the time being and potentially just go in with one Everton, that being Pickford, bring in Wissa for João Pedro, and then I've also got 3 free transfers going into game week 25 as well, rather than going full throttle on the Everton defence in particular. My instinct is to make all three, but do let me know in the comments below what you make of my transfer plans at the moment. And of course, we'll revisit these discussions later on in the game week as I look to lock in my team ahead of Double Game Week 24. As always, if you've got any questions of your own, do let me know in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you before the deadline. And if you've enjoyed today's video, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated.